الحمد لله رب العالمين صلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Islamic Oasis Live. And this time, again, with the subject, part 2 of the subject that we were continuing on AI. This time, of course, we're talking about democracy and the challenges AI poses to democracy. Now, you might be asking, why did we choose a topic like this? Is AI really a challenge to democracy? Is AI a challenge to any of the systems around? Well, obviously, many of you know that technologies, we live in an environment completely surrounded by technologies and all kinds of new inventions taking place. And you see the power of media, you see the power of technologies, you see how people can be manipulated, masses can be manipulated in general. And manipulation is in many ways a key factor in democracies. You see people, politicians, businessmen, corporations manipulating, whether they're customers or their, constituencies in order to get votes, in order to get bills passed. So much of that takes place in the system. So in order to see the challenge that AI poses, good, bad, or ugly, we brought our brother back, Brother Hamza, in order to discuss part 2 of the challenges AI poses. So Brother Hamza, welcome back to Islamic Oasis Live.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, brother. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. And of course, Eid Mubarak, a bit late, but Eid Mubarak.
Eid Mubarak. Yes, belatedly.
Brother Hamza, let's get to this straight because of time. What are the challenges now? I mean, we at least in the West, you see what's taking place in France. You see what's taking place in, South America, what's happening in Palestine, in Jenin. Manipulation. I mean, I was hearing one journalist today talking about Jenin, for instance, saying that, you have thousands of people walking into Jenin, but the question, the way the journalist put the whole situation as, Israeli army is going in order to take out the terrorists. Now, this is, of course, human beings being able to manipulate others. What happens when you have technologies such as AI? What are what challenges do we face here as far as trying to decipher between truth and falsehood? A news that's actual news versus some commercial.
Right. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala ali ashraf al-anbiya wa al-mursaleen nabiyina wa habibina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsan ila yawm ad-din. So, brother, you are asking a very critical question, and it's something that has come to a point that I think we have never seen before. Because today, with the age of technology, social media, and obviously AI, we are seeing in the world a fight, if you like, or truth and falsehood, between disinformation, distraction, diversion, and all sorts of things. So everybody out there who are interested in power is busy trying to manipulate, right? They're trying to put their narrative and make their narrative the most prominent. And obviously, if you follow our previous discussion, the thing about AI is that it adds a dimension which we have not had before. AI is intelligent in the sense that it can achieve the objective that you set it out to do by itself. It has a capability, a scale, and a speed that we have never seen before, for example. It has therefore a reach and an ability to manipulate us, manipulate our opinions, especially our emotions, in the way we have never seen before, right? So when you see the news out there today, we see a battle between one narrative over sometimes another narrative, or in the case of the Ummah, in the Islamic Ummah, it is the narrative of the powers that be over truth, frankly. And you've mentioned Paris, you've mentioned Jenin, right? You've mentioned there's so many other places where, this is an old game, right? That they manipulate, they cover their falsehood. And the trouble with AI, the problem is now that they are employing AI to augment all these capabilities. And this then becomes a challenge for the Ummah, challenge for global public opinion, for the battle to win global public opinion, to get people to understand what really is happening.
So, Sheikh, I mean, when you say that, what? Okay, so let's just step by step on this. It's what is it that AI can do? I mean, obviously, you said, okay, this is intelligent, it's fast, it's able to. So, if it's intelligent, I mean, that should be good for us.
Yes. But intelligent here, the definition is the ability, its ability to achieve, to attain an objective, to work out,
that doesn't matter.
to go through. It does not mean an understanding of right and wrong. It does not even know when it is correct. It understands it has to achieve an objective. So, for example, in the, as we discussed previously, you have people acknowledging that the impact of seeing an image or hearing a voice that sounds like somebody, it has an impact, right? The website warontherocks.com published an article talking about the application of fake deep fakes and through artificial personalities. And they talk about 4chan, and I think I mentioned this previously, how a character, and this was not real at all, a machine persona of a girl saying that she had been attacked by immigrants, had been kidnapped and assaulted by immigrants. Although this person did not exist, and those immigrants did not exist, the whole story was fake, but it resulted in revenge attacks. People were provoked. And this was all completely fake. And as Eric Schmidt said in an interview on CNN and in May this year, and he talked about the concern he has for the coming elections in America, and the concerns about how AI brings deep fake to the whole process of democracy. And he says, even though you tell people it's a fake, and they know, and they watch it, and they know that it is a fake, but it changes their behavior for reasons we don't understand. And this is the thing about AI. Generative AI, you have things that can generate images. You have Mid-Journey, Stable Diffusion. With text, you can actually generate images, right? You can generate fake pictures. There are some presently now being generated of famous politicians in compromising situations. And even though it is mentioned as, it is to highlight the danger of deep fake, it is still very disturbing to see. In fact, the artist who did this as a wake-up call has been banned from using this particular company's capabilities. You've got voices now you can generate, for example, text-to-speech. So you can mimic people, and this is a concern for cybersecurity. So this brings this new capability that previously we could not do. And by the time, in the heat of truth and narratives and counter narratives, who has the time to chase? Who has the time to verify what is real, what is not real, right? So can you imagine in the process of democracy, this then becomes really tenuous, isn't it? People will just take on the lie and propagate the lie. And in the end, it is emotion that comes to decide who wins. And, God forbid, it might come to the point that the biggest liar wins. And this is through the capability of AI.
Sure, but here's the thing. Okay, so two questions. Is your concern that is it only in democracy that your concern is that in democracies, or is it any system? Because of course we know democracies depend so much on public opinion, or majority, polling and all of that stuff. So is your concern that in manipulation is so much more possible in the democratic countries, or manipulation in democratic institutions is much more possible or easily because they are so prone to the idea of majority wins?
Yes. I mean, the short answer of it is yes. Democracy has a humongous problem in that it is a system that is so open to manipulation. And it is so telling that.
What about China? If it was in China, that wouldn't be as big of a problem?
No, not as big of a problem, because it is much more under control, isn't it? I mean, the very nature of the system, even the ability to communicate is suppressed, or is controlled rather, right? And of course also suppressed. Yeah. So in that sense, it stops the rapid propagation of disinformation and outright lies. And there, I would say, in an authoritarian system, the system has the dominant voice, right? Their narrative is the one that carries. And in some ways, AI can also be used, but in a different way, right? It can be used by the people to propagate, or to spread, or to try to mount a fight to bring some truth to light. The issue isn't the tool. The issue is the system. And why is that? Fundamentally, democracy is a conflation of two things. It is the conflation of selecting somebody to represent you or as your leader, and mixing that up with the ability to create law, to legislate, right? So if we were to contrast this with Islam, for example, Islam, there is an election process. Contrary to popular belief, there is actually a selection, an election, right? And however, the selected person is there to implement a set of laws and a system that is already understood, that is already preordained, that has been given to us. So when the leader, the big tech, when they went to meet Congress in America, and they were asking for what they call guide rails to be put in place to control, to manage AI, right? In some ways, when you select a human being, and this human being has come to power based on populism. Populism basically is an approach of, whatever is popular will be made into law, right? But I will implement whatever you want. So the problem with that is then, this is the dangers that some of these people, some of the ancient founders of the system actually warned about, right? So the problem with democracy itself, the system itself, is inherent to manipulation, because at the end of the day, we understand people in social media. It is a well-known, they've exploited the research of Skinner, Skinner's so-called Skinner's box, B.F. Skinner, and he understands the issue of conditioning animals, the variable reward schedule experiments that he conducted, the experiments of B.J. Fogg, for example, in Stanford University, where he also did experiments with pigeons, right? And how they managed to manipulate the pigeon using a reward system. So similarly, social media understood this, and and what has resulted from that is a way where people, in order to get clickbaits, and in order to get notoriety or attention, they create outlandish, fantastical stories, right? And even lies, And all of that is just to get, and then the more outrageous it is, the more emotional it is, the more hateful it is, the wider it is spread. And this is a problem, isn't it? So this is, when you talk about society being ruled by emotions rather than by actual facts or truth, you're asking for trouble, isn't it? It is very clear.
I mean, okay, what's the role of money? I mean, isn't money already? Look at the amount of money that is used in democratic elections, millions, if not billions, to get somebody elected. I mean, the whole idea is to manipulate as many as people as possible to get the vote. So that already happens, no? I mean, but in your case,
Yes,
you're saying this will
definitely it
happen at a
happens.
rate you cannot even imagine.
At a rate, at a scale, in a form that we cannot even imagine. We can have now so much deep fakes that can be chucked out there. It can be manufactured by a sentence, right? And it's out there already manipulating the public. I'll give you an example. Cambridge Analytica. We understand Cambridge Analytica. This is all now old news. But fundamentally what they did was they did an analysis of people's reality through social media. And they put them into personalities, types of people, and they focus on the undecideds. And they bombarded the undecideds. They took them from the position, whatever position they were, on one side, and slowly by giving them increasingly more and more intense, disinformation, or if you like, propaganda, they managed to bring them slowly from, perhaps a reasonable position, right, logical, sensible position, to whatever position it was that they intended, right? And this has been repeated during the Brexit elections in Britain, in Europe, and the people of Britain, for example, are now suffering. So money definitely plays a part, because money can empower the weaponization, the full mobilization of AI, to a greater extent and greater scale. And again, coming back to the issue, is it the system? Is it just democracy? Democracy is particularly susceptible. And, when you go back to, they talk about their civilization being established in Greco-Roman roots, right? You have Aristotle and Plato speaking out against democracy. As far as Aristotle was concerned, in a pure democracy, it is the will of the majority which is sovereign. Aristotle does not believe in the will of the majority, because they'll be pulling it left, right, whichever way they want to satisfy their personal selfish needs. Whereas he considers that the optimum condition should be the law should be sovereign. And law here is, a set of enlightened principles, right? Plato, and to quote Plato, Plato's concern is that democracy causes corruption of the people through public opinion, and creates rulers who do not actually know how to rule. They don't know how to rule, but they're swayed, and they're trying to win the influence of the public, and which he calls the beast. So the beast, demos, the public, is the one that rules, and it goes any which way. And this is to the detriment of their nation state or to society. And then you get Socrates arguing against democracy. And because they understood that the correct way, there has to be a set of actually good principles as opposed to just pure populist selfishness, right? And this thing, when you talk about money, there's an interesting tie to some of Noam Chomsky's positions. I do not know, Noam Chomsky had some ideas about, how democracy is being manipulated, right? The manufacture of consent, the manipulation of public opinion. Yes. And Chomsky mentioned that, that most of the people, 80% or so of the people really don't really care what's going on, don't have the time, not bothered, don't really understand. Effectively, they're just sheep. Whereas the 20%, or the establishment, if you like, or the elite, if you like, right? They are the ones who actually know what is going on, and they manipulate. So going back to your question, how does money play a role? Yes, money, in fact, is the case against democracy, I would argue, right? If money is not necessarily the principle of right, wrong, good, or bad. Money is self-interest, isn't it? If you already have a system that can manipulate clearly, patently, there is no denying it is manipulatable and manipulated by money. What more if it is now weaponized and there's a force multiplier of AI that you apply to it, right? That understands emotions. Then you're really in trouble, isn't it? Because now
How does
whoever
AI
has the bigger pot can win.
how does AI understand emotions? I mean, I heard you say that a couple of times. I mean, is it understands because of algorithms, right? I mean, obviously the whole thing is working on the what you are providing. So, but to understand emotions, meaning, but it doesn't. Okay, so it understands emotions, but it doesn't think.
No, this is a good question. When we say understands emotions for the system, for AI, it obviously does not have understanding in our sense of the word. For AI, it'll be looking for a cluster of data points. Whatever is the signature, the pattern that we say, this is anger, this is emotion, this is passion, or this is love or hate or whatever. This is what so it will be up to us that will be inputting, or whoever is using the system, and they will be driving this, right? And I give you a very interesting AI which was developed by Meta. It's called Cicero, and this AI is able to win at a game called Diplomacy. Are you familiar with Diplomacy?
No.
The game? Diplomacy is it's a highbrow version of Game of Nations. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah, of course. Oh,
it's an old board game.
Oh, I have the book Game of Nations.
It's got different names, right? In different parts of the world, it has different names. So Game of Nations is basically a game where you try to conquer the world, right? So it's a board game. Everybody has some countries, has some military capability and so on, and you try to conquer the world. Diplomacy is a higher brow version of this, and it requires communication and strategy. So you have a strategy and you need to communicate to your fellow players, whether to lie, to form alliances, to attack, to cheat, to whatever, right? This AI, Cicero, was able to win at diplomacy. So imagine, right, that we now are in the game. The elections 2024 is the game, right? And we need to win people, to convince people, right, to come our way, or to select our candidate, or to go with our policies, etc., right? And so this system is able it can set out its own strategy. It sets out its own communication. On the feedback of that communication, adjust the strategy and go on to win. Remember what the definition of intelligence was? To be able to achieve the objective, right? So now, alongside whatever campaign manager or strategist you will have in House Democrat or House Republican, you're going to have all these AI engines, and whoever can have the best, biggest, largest data sets or data points or whoever, right? Best algorithms, most accurate models will win, potentially. So where does policy, vision, humanity, justice, where does all of that come in? Now, I mentioned Noam Chomsky. I'm sorry, just at this point, maybe you want to come back to it, right? Noam Chomsky said in a recent interview that there are two parties in America, and he said that really one of them has abandoned the principles of democracy. And I shall leave it to you to work out which party has abandoned the principles, right? And he talks about how basically their policies is for the rich. I'm paraphrasing. This policy of this particular party is for big money, right? Big money, big tech, big oil, whatever. It is the big money. And so if they were to implement their policy, they would never be elected in on a fair fight. So what do? Instead, they will create anything. They will create an issue out of anything, whether it is your gas stoves or having, high-powered rifles or whatever it may be, right? Or QAnon or whatever this nonsense that will evoke emotions. The more emotions and the more anger it evokes, and this is all out of thin air. isn't it? The more that it evokes, the better, because then people elect these people in. They then will implement their actual policy whilst pretending to go after these things which really make no difference to everybody's day-to-day lives. And this was Noam Chomsky and his this on another podcast, and it was on the 17th of April in 2023 on China artificial intelligence, and funnily enough, the 2024 presidential elections. And Chomsky was one of the professors I had to read, his books I had to read when I was studying linguistics in AI, natural language processing, actually, way back in 1999, by the way. And this bit is interesting, but only to me, perhaps. But the point is that people are aware this thing will be manipulated. The powers that be are fully aware.
That's one thing.
It's the people that does not know.
You said something about language, even like linguistics. Isn't that already? They seem to be already using language to manipulate them. I mean, what's the role of linguists?
100%.
So how do you give me an example? How would that work? Like usage of language to manipulate something. In AI, within that framework, I mean, obviously you have to study. You have to go and take classes.
Natural language processing, yes, yeah.
So how? Meaning, Sheikh Hamid, this is whether democracy or not. This is going to happen. Anyone who has access to that kind of information can manipulate.
Well, it really depends, and I really think that, and I have looked and thought about this, right, and researched. Language is amazing. Some people even go as far as to say, in fact, one of the things that materialists, right, those who don't really believe in a creator, they cannot explain the origin of language. It is not as straightforward as you think, right? Language is the transmission of ideas, sometimes abstract ideas. And it is not something that one clever monkey or chimp or ape or whatever you believe in, right, can spontaneously develop by itself, because it has to be able to communicate with some other intelligent chimp or monkey that also spontaneously at least has to understand, There's a lot of controversy to this, right? It is not as straightforward as they try to make it out to be.
I was talking to just to on that issue. For instance, when we're talking about distinguishing mind, or when we talk about having previous information to be able to distinguish that information, to come up to a conclusion. I mean, it's not possible that any other than Adam alayhi salam. It's because there had to be a mind that is present to be able to distinguish and take information and then to produce something out of that. Anyway, go on. But This is very interesting because I was just curious to see how important language is in this whole development.
You're absolutely correct. And the mind has to be there, correct. And part of that which makes the mind is something you mentioned as well in passing, previous information. And how did they understand? Where did that come from? How do they then identify or map some reality to a particular word or sound or language, basically, right? Language also has a structure. It is serial. You cannot say multiple words in one go. There are things one at a time, and there's a particular structure to this. If you do not understand the structure, it breaks, right? So this thing is actually, this is why when Alan Turing, who set the so-called Turing test, the test was simple, that if you were, effectively behind a screen or in another room or something, and you were communicating with something, if you are no longer able to distinguish whether this is machine or man, i.e. you're convinced that this is another human being communicating with you, it has passed the Turing test. So effectively, I would say, some would argue AI has already passed the Turing test. And as you were saying, what it is the ability to convince somebody that this is a human being. and you know that crooks, criminals are already exploiting the generative capabilities of AI to simulate people in their particular style, in their prose in their particular style, or patterns that they use. So, for example, you can go to ChatGPT now and ask it to write you a poem on any subject in the style of Malcolm X, for example. And I asked ChatGPT 3.5 at the time to generate a poem on justice in the style of Malcolm X, and it's quite convincing. I don't think Malcolm X was a poet necessarily. The point is now it can mimic convincingly, right? If you map that then to a strategy of convincing somebody using the right amount of emotion based on their reaction, based on the time they look at this thing and what they do subsequent to that action and so on, you effectively can set up a strategy to manipulate human beings, right? Communication isn't just with words, right? We say, some say that most of the material part of communication is with the eyes. It is the gestures, the expressions on the face, right? The hands and so on. Words are just part of communication. So now you add to this ability of AI to generate images, to generate videos possibly, right? To generate in any style. In fact, there has just been a recent case where one so-called what they believe to be a liberal, what do you call this, influencer on a left-wing influencer on Twitter has just been outed as probably being a fake. This entity is called Erica Marsh. And Erica Marsh was like this crazy left-wing liberal, thingy, which the right wing really liked, because basically they were able to use her to show how crazy or allegedly how crazy the left or the Democrats were, right? The liberals were. And now they find out that this probably is, this account on Twitter, which it was probably rage baiting. So evoking emotions using, generating rage in order to achieve the objective. And this was an article in the Washington Post in July, on July. And so, I thought it was quite useful for this conversation of ours, right? And this has already started.
Huh. So, Sheikh, okay, so you're saying basically, so let's say the role of lobbying, in this case, for instance, in the US government here, the lobbyists put together all kinds of money in order to get what they want passed. Actually, there was an article that one of the brothers printed out here saying that what they did was that some of the questions that we wanted to ask you, the brother ran it through AI. And here's some of the questions, Actually, what they found was that as language models improve, agency and congressional staff will need to rely on greater digital literacy to understand the risks they pose. Why? Because it seems like more, even these politicians were reading emails that were written by ChatGPT, meaning this was able to influence them more. And they were replying to this more just because the way things were written. And they had no idea who they were talking to.
Yes, this is true. And in fact, in the very early days of GPT 3. I'm talking about early days of GPT-4. In fact, it was 3.5. People already cottoned on to this, and they were trying to get them to ChatGPT to write their cover letters for them, their job applications for them, and so on, because it could take on this much more convincing, much more formal, much more, depending on whichever style you wish,
I mean,
really,
it says
right?
here the analysis
For the
showed
particular
that,
field.
the analysis showed that legislators found that the AI-generated text almost as credible as human-written messages, particularly on issues
Yes,
of gun
and
control and health policy.
yes, and it can be again, but then I must caution that particular point. I mean, challenge that particular point because I think to me this whole issue about gun control and so on again is the subject of manipulation of emotions, right? The whole idea of gun control in the history of the US, it has a particular role and function, and that was to check, to ensure that there is no oppression. The government behaves, basically, the government of the day behaves itself, right? That everybody has the right to bear arms. However, it has now become a completely irrational discussion, I think, and people are suffering for it, right? So it is not only the lobbying that happens; it is also the public opinion that is whipped up by these things. And AI can do both sides of, if you like, AI can work on both sides of the fence to lobby the politicians with these emails, to bombard them with fake individuals or personalities, as well as to win the public opinion on social media, in public, and so on, right? Targeted campaigning. And this goes back again to the manipulation, the ability to manipulate democracy.
It says
You
here,
know, it is like a ship that has multiple captains. Which way are you heading?
it says a report from Brookings Institution where they sent emails to politicians to see if AI written works could be identified from human written one. I mean,
Yeah.
they couldn't identify. It seems at least. I mean, it was very easily manipulated. Okay, to this, Sheikh, let me ask you this. I mean, as days pass by, Sheikh, democracy is becoming more and more irrational in general. You look at transgenderism, you look at a lot of this going on where a person is being told that man is a woman and woman is a man, and then there is whole, going against human instincts, going against human nature to say, it's like saying 1 + 1 + 1 is 1. And we are supposed to accept that, and then a policy is built on not only false premise, but everything else. Sheikh, I mean, so how dangerous is this whole situation, Sheikh? I mean, there are two things here. One, can AI completely take over human irrationality and say, look, these things, you people, you are just irrational. Machines don't think this way. And say, so completely eliminate human activity. Is that possible? Or, because especially in a democracy where it can be so irrational. First of all, can machines be rational?
Machines are not rational or irrational.
Okay.
And specifically by machines, I'm assuming you mean AI, right?
Well, I'm looking at algorithms, and I'm saying that machines.
Yes.
Can it take an algorithm, and can it recognize something that's irrational? Let me put it. I don't know how else to ask this because can it take an algorithm and say, this doesn't make sense? Because for instance, to AI, I was asking a question the other day. I mean, I was playing games with this thing, and I said, I asked him something. It said, I'm not supposed to answer that.
Yes. Okay. So somebody's put in some controls, certain keywords or key questions or key issues that the system has been told, do not answer this, right? A certain, perhaps sensitive, or what is denoted to be sensitive, right? So no, hang on. So I think your question is actually this. One, when you say rational or irrational, has it got morals? Has it got a point of view about what is right, wrong, good, and bad? The answer is no.
I'm being even more particular than that. I mean,
so
because rationality has nothing to do with morality, does it? I guess it can be.
It is separate. It's a separate issues. Yes, I understand, but it is separate issues in this context. Yeah, I understand.
Because in this case, you're talking to a machine that is 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. Can a machine say, okay, fine, 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 1?
No, but again,
I can manipulate it.
Again, yes. So it depends, right? Again, as I said, that broadly speaking, there's two approaches to AI. One is programmable AI, and generally in programmable AI, you will never get that kind of what you call irrational conclusion. So 1 plus 1 plus 1 will always be 3. The other type, the other approach to AI, the one that's very popular and really big right now, is this machine learning approach, right? So where it is the system actually learns, whether it learns by itself or it is trained using data sets and so on. This system just returns or responds or generates a response based on how it has been trained. So if you were to tell it, if you were to teach it that what you say 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 1, it will return that. That is what is expected of it. Because the trainers will make sure, will tune the system, the algorithm, so that it understands that then is the objective. Remember, we talked about the intelligent system, right? And this is the danger of asking the system. Yes, at the moment you can ask it, and perhaps there's enough in the data that it has been fed or been given to train. There's enough common sense still out there, right? But supposing we live in a world of 10 people, and the system is taking in all the inputs and ideas of these 10 people, and 9 of these people say that it is, broken glass is a delicious meal for stir frying, as an example, right? And then you ask the system, if it has been trained on this kind of understanding, you ask the system, what is a delicious form of stir fry? It will say broken glass. It will accept that. Do you see? And this is the danger, the confusion of going to the system. It is basically a mathematical response, a model. It is built upon its training data, its training sets, if you like. So we've now, in the world of bias, we're talking about bias now, right? In some ways, to the machine, what we call right, wrong, good, bad, or even rational or irrational, to the machine, it is a form of managed bias, right? And that is a challenge. So back to the issue of democracy, when there are no guide rails in the system, and there are no guide rails in what is right, wrong, good, or bad for society, what are you're asking? You are going to face a massive challenge, right? And people will be confused if they think that they're going to get answers. And I've seen some really ridiculous, scenarios where they have made AI their god. Some have made AI the head of their political party. Some are turning to AI to give them good policies, for example, right? So this is a misunderstanding. This is a not a intelligent application of AI, because I think coming from a misunderstanding of the system. What is actual limitations? Just because it can mimic a good response, right? A confident response does not mean it is the correct response. So there's a problem of reality and the problem of mimicking reality, right? So rationality, I understand, right? But what you are talking about, I'll give you to give another quick example. In Britain, one of the most there's a very famous headmistress, right? She's known as the most strict headmistress in Britain. And she had brought to light the problem that some schools are facing, where children are turning up to schools with wearing these fake ears, because they have self-identified as cats. And talking about irrational, right? If you ridiculously can come out and say,
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
I mean, we have students, high schools here, they want to be called a bug because they think they're a bug. And then, men are walking into women locker rooms saying that they are, today they are men, binary, this, that. Sheikh, meaning democracy itself allows this type of irrationality to continue, to happen, to exist. So what I'm saying is that, so is technologies like this is going to be, okay, can it be the reason for demise of democracy? I mean, democracy just falls apart. It cannot, because it doesn't have the wherewithal to be able to contain this.
I think we have to differentiate between the tool that might accelerate it or might facilitate it, right? And the same tool, of course, can also be used to fight the challenges that we are talking about here, right? Of disinformation and so on. You have to differentiate between the tool and the system itself, the reality, the weaknesses, or the strengths, if any, of the system. When we talk about democracy, remember I said at the beginning that there is a conflation between election of a person, and legislating law or creating law, defining right, wrong, good, and bad, right? The fundamental problem is in the latter, because the human being, generally, has to make three types of judgment, if you like. They need to use their mind for three things that you will face in life. The first, and this is going back to my cognitive science thing, right? So the first is, what is that thing? What is it, right? What is the reality of it? This, the human mind generally can determine. As long as it can see it, understand it, sense it, generally it can determine, right? This is a glass. This is a cup. That's the first thing you have to determine. You're going back to language and, what is it, right? The second thing, whether I like this thing or not. Do I like this glass? Yes, I like it because it's simple. It's, neat, clean, simple lines. I like modernist, very simple things, right? Straightforward, functional things. So what is it? Do I like it? That's the two judgments. The third judgment is it good or bad for me? This, the human mind is not equipped to do. Why? Because when we go back to the definition of the mind, it is, one of the key components of the mind is previous information. If you do not have the information, you cannot make a judgment. You can say, I like to be a cat. I like to be identified as a cat. But is this good for me? Is it good for society? I want to be a stone. I've decided that there was a craze a few years ago that everybody suddenly wanted to be this vampire thing. And they started to identify as vampires, right? They were drinking blood. I mean, how ridiculous is that, right? They were going around and pretending to be, I don't know, this is the reality of it, right? Yeah. So is it better to have high-powered weapons even though kids are being slaughtered at schools? Is this better? So this third judgment is the conflation. Now so contrast this system, for example. China has the same problem. It is an authoritarian system, right? It is a communist ideology. It carries a communist ideology. It implemented this with a one-child policy. This is multiple decades ago, right? The one-child policy, to the best of their thinkers, philosophers, or whatever principles from communism it came, was to manage the population, right? And the simple reasoning was, if I have one big pie, if I have less children, everybody gets a better share of the big pie. Of course, we can see the disaster that China has faced till today, right? And the compound disasters on top of that, in terms of the impact of the economy, its future capability to force project, etc., etc. There's a lot of issues in China, and a lot of issues even in the West that they're facing as well today, right? Impacting every aspect of life, whether it is to have people taking care of the seniors, whether it is an economy and so on. They cannot judge, even though it is a communist system. So now you have the other ideology, the third ideology on this earth, the only three ideologies, the third ideology, which has not existed for a while now, for about over 100 years, where the third aspect, this judgment, this previous information is sent via a messenger to define right, wrong, good, and bad. Now we are complete. And now our life is secure. Our rights as an individual are protected, and the harmony of society is protected, the security of society is protected. And so now this is, with this kind of system, it is less susceptible to manipulation, because the critical aspect, which nobody has any idea of apart from the creator, is defined. It's not subject to opinion, emotion, manipulation, right? So now immediately it's a different discussion now, right? Is there going to be an impact of lies and deceit? Of course there is. But even within Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually warns us, tells us not to get carried away with news, with fake news. When something comes, in a critical situation, verify, check. Islam actually tells you, 1,400 years ago, verify in case it's fake news.
Yes,
right?
Yeah,
it is inbuilt into Islam. Yes.
Yeah, let me see. There's a question that's coming. There is Sheikh, I guess on the issue of rule of expert and scientific approach to life. For instance, it says the issue of quantifying good and evil by purely rationalistic inquiry. I mean, continuation or biases, like information can be processed to meet agendas. The abuse of statistics. I mean, I guess what we're saying to justify, rhetoric and using LLM to manipulate public opinion. I mean, I guess we're saying that this is the problem with democracy, no matter what. This is what is going to happen. So what I'm saying, yes, Sheikh, is that so is democracy is it going to kill itself? And as new technologies come around, these ideologies that exist today, whether it's communism or capitalism, they're going to fall apart. And Islamic, because of its systematic approach to things, is going to become. Is that what you're saying? That because look, Islam has a very systematic approach to things, and democracy does not.
So, no. So what I'm saying is that inherent democracy is particularly susceptible to manipulation, deceit, to lies. And using technology of today, social media technology, you are able to manipulate people, right? And using analytics, you're able to target, isolate segments of society. And you can take them from a left-leaning opinion, for example, to a right-leaning,
depending on what you're trying to achieve.
Correct. Exactly right. Depending on that. And we know it has been shown again and again, right? In the previous elections, in the Brexit, in the elections in Southeast Asia, for example, we have seen that happen. The second point is that because democracy is particularly susceptible to this, right? AI is a force multiplier. It is a force multiplier for disinformation, for confusion, to raise anger, to manipulate. And added to that is the ability for AI to be brought in, to strategize, to follow through, to campaign, to push on, right? And to pursue until the objective is met. In fact, some systems are able to adapt because the objective is to win the game. To AI is just a game. It doesn't judge right, wrong, good, bad. So depending on the parameters you set it will try to fulfill its purpose, its objective. And this then, if you have an inherently, for example, you're a boat, the boat called democracy, and you are a boat that is very unstable. It's shallow, it's very heavy, it's unstable, and the ocean is very choppy, right? The world right now is in turmoil. We have lots of challenges. We have wars. We have, enemy states and so on. And compare that to a much more stable ship, right? That has got a deep keel, that has got stabilizers. How do you then, if you were to add now a system that can rock the ship even more, which ship is more susceptible to sinking? if you have strong winds blowing it, bigger waves hitting it, which ship is susceptible to disaster, right? So now with the advent of AI and the problem with deep fakes, it is faking not just the physical, the visual aspect or the audio aspect. It is also, as you were saying, the text, the communication aspect. The person thinks this is a real human being. In some cases, they think this is my daughter, this is my son asking me for emergency money, for help, and so on. So AI is already being used, right, by some criminals to trick people into sending money and so on. Yes, corruption, etc. Right? And you can tie, very sincere politicians can be, you can bombard them with all sorts of sleaze and lies and slander. And they will spend their time trying to get out of this, try to remove the muck from this reality, right? So this election is, rather than having a very well, clear, informed kind of selection, it's going to be emotion, it's going to be confusion, and it's going to be chaos. So now, how are you as a nation supposed to be, how do you navigate out of that, right? There needs to be some incentive for big tech to get involved, to help with this, to counter this concern. But big tech is not incentivized to do this at the moment, right?
Because the basis is money.
Yes, the basis is money.
Basis.
Correct.
So, Sheikh,
and that personality I was talking about, this fake, the fake person on Twitter, was basically after Elon Musk made that, declaration that he was going to eradicate all this scam and spam and so on, right? As per the Washington Post article. And yet this fake entity existed. And this so-called Erica Marsh personality is now gone. It's disappeared now. But how many more are there out there, right? Putin, for example.
Let me ask you this. The issue with democracy, it seems also that it learns through experience. Every time it has to go through. Well, that it does it is it's a good question too. But meaning it learns through. I guess what I'm trying to say is because they don't have a stable source where they can get previous information. They try something, then it messes them up, and then they say, "Oh, we should not have tried this." And in the process, you have crisis, you have loss of life, you have loss of wealth. I guess so now in Islam we don't have that, because we have and we are going directly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who knows what's good and what's bad. Now I guess what I'm saying, Sheikh, is that technologies, I mean, are you telling me that the scholars cannot manipulate using AI, even in the Muslims, amongst the Muslims?
Again, it's a tool. We have to understand it is a tool. It has certain capabilities and certain restrictions. So the first thing is, a scholar, in Islam.
Just before you answer, I'm going to ask one more question. For instance, I mean, this is just for the sake of this discussion here. Many people came up with false hadith. Right?
Yes.
Okay. There was, because of this issue, that there were people coming and saying, قال الله, قال رسول, قال رسول, قال رسول. And then ulama realized this. And then, of course, we came up with the whole study of ilm al-rijal and usul al-hadith and, all of these different studies that we have in Islam in order to make sure that we reach to the correct source. So now, I guess what I'm trying to say is that not, that kind of...
Can they generate fake hadith?
That too. I mean, unless you go back to a source, that you have to show there's a source.
Yes. So in some sense, right, we have two components to this. يعني the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran, which is protected and will remain protected till the end of time. We have Hufad who know every letter of this book. It is not going to be, it will never be manipulated. It will not succeed. And Allah is the one who protects this. And we believe this will be the case until the end of time, as Allah wills.
Of course.
The second is the book of Rasulullah. So as you say, there were many in the history of Islam. There were the enemies of Islam, enemies of humanity, really, right? That tried to manipulate hadith, manufactured, and so on. Some with good intention, some with not so good intention, evil intentions, right? But we have a lot of the checks and balances now in place. We have, as you say, the signs of the chain of narrators, the signs of the subjects, correct. We also have, beyond that, the book that is immutable. It cannot be changed, has no error in it. That, everything validates against this, qat'i source, a decisively true and correct source. So when that is the case, again, as you say, this is the most solid guide rail that we can, that any one is able to have. It does not change. So then when you are checking against this, we already safeguarded, inshallah, right?
So you're saying that
So
for us
the
as
system-
Muslims, the technology would always have to first make sure that it has to
is validated against our
the Quran.
Quran and
Yes.
our Sharia, yes.
And in case
And
of
all the
democracy,
sciences that we have,
in case of
yes.
democracy, is changing mindsets daily.
yes.
Nothing is
It is
stable.
completely nothing is stable. It is a system without in a chaotic system, right? You need to have a strange attractor, an organizer, right? At the heart of it, there is nothing. It is purely populism, right? Populism, basically whatever is good, popular, and what is popular can be anything. You can evoke emotions, right? At one time, a particular look is popular, and then it is dropped. I've been looking at they always boast, the West always boasts about their civilization, their values, and so on, right? They had this debate, with all sorts of people about Western values being universal values. The other thing that I can see that has been very stable amongst the Western values is two things, right? One, hypocrisy. Hypocrisy.
On a daily
And the
basis.
other is lies.
Yes.
And they lie, right? And this is the tragic, but this seems to be the one that never changes. There was a time when adultery was considered wrong. There was a time in the West, buggery was considered an offense, right? There was a time when, and so on. There's so many things, right? Even the proper dress of a woman was considered, necessary, right? It was for society. But everything changes. And this is when you say they learn from their mistakes. And I say, and I had that question, do they actually? So morality seems to be, every year, it seems to be getting worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point that there's actual real confusion now, isn't it? As you were saying, some people think they're trees or cats or, Jedi masters or something. Yeah.
Okay, final question, Sheikh. Who is really behind this AI? I mean, when you look at the average American, the average American is confused, lost, running around in parades with underwear and high heels, trying to figure out, should I go and to the bathroom in a litter, or should I actually go where human beings go? This seems to be at least in the city that we are in, Chicago. I mean, it's beyond belief what you get to see here. In order to produce the kind of technologies that are being produced, you can't have those kind of people behind this type of technologies. Who is doing this, Sheikh? And if they are, then we are in trouble already. It's done deal. And if they are not, how much have they already been manipulated by this And what's their goal? I mean, first of all, who are these people, Sheikh? I mean, that runs these type of, who's running this industry? Let's put it this way.
I mean, in my humble opinion, I believe that these are different and separate things. I don't think there's a general conspiracy to use, to manufacture, to create these, tools to manipulate the human mind or the human being or society. I think generally it is madaniyah. It is a technology, a capability that people pursue to make life easier, right? To make the effort more effective, and basically to achieve a better life, right, generally for all mankind. Albeit some do it with the motivation of making money, for example, and some because for defense and so on, right? But I think it's two separate things. So the Madaniya has no tie back to a particular point of view about man, life, universe. Generally speaking, technology isn't established upon a faith of some kind or a creed of some kind, right? So Muslims are just as much involved and just as much, very much into this whole AI capability for all sorts of, reasons, and for all sorts of good. And non-Muslims are also involved. And just because they are non-Muslims, they're not necessarily being involved in technology, research, science, breakthroughs, and so on, just because they want to be able to do evil, right? There is a genuine. This is a completely separate subject altogether.
Medical.
Yes,
of course, there is.
Correct. So there's a lot of that, right? And in fact, a lot of this research started way back in the 30s and the 50s, and sometimes it is led first by imagination, right? By what the possibilities, the potentials, and the mankind. We are always progressing, right? So we're always trying to achieve, to secure, our basic needs, our organic and our instincts, our requirements in an easier, better way, right? Quicker, faster, cheaper.
No, but I guess what I'm asking, Sheikh, is the hypocrisy of the West, I guess, meaning when it comes to developing these kind of things, it is nothing but rational.
Yeah.
But when it comes to application of this, then it's nothing but hypocritical.
Yes, so it goes back to that point I made about the three things a human being has to judge. Broadly speaking, those three buckets, right? What is it? Do I like it? Yes, by all means. That's up to us. But whether this is going to be good or bad in how we use it, that is not up to us. And this is where I think they fail. So they are not guided by any principle, good, bad, right, or wrong. They are guided by benefit, by self-interest, isn't it? By material satisfaction. And so they will use and apply that per what they understand to be the purpose of their life. And in our discussion about AI and democracy here, I think it exposes the fundamental challenges of a man-made system. I believe the people who tried to formulate this had good intentions, right? To escape the tyranny of kings, the tyranny of ignorance, right? That was there in Europe at the time. But instead of coming to the enlightenment of Islam and the rational aqidah,
you talk about democracy. Okay, correct. So you're saying
right.
But Sheikh, I guess that's what I was asking. They always, well, you were asking, whether they learn from experience or not. But I guess the democratic experience has not been. I mean, now it's on question. It's being questioned day and night in almost probably every capital.
Yes, and I think the sad thing is this. I want to ask you sincerely, as an American, what is there real democracy here? If you are selecting something, right, that I think the fact that you're selecting, there's no dispute, right? But the fact that you think you are selecting what you want to select, I think is disputable. I think you are selecting what the manipulators want you.
Right.
Yes.
The choices.
You think you have a choice.
Well, no, it's not even you think you have a choice. It goes beyond that. Even the choices that are put in front of you is already through a manipulation process. Meaning
Yes.
that you are told that these are the choices that you have and nothing more. So you only have those because
Yes.
those people who can come to become your choice also comes through money, and that money
Yes.
played a certain role to bring about that a candidate to be where he or she is. So I mean, money. So money, language, the ability to use language as a tool, the ability to use money as a tool, in order to create or generate or create these technologies. I guess it has always been there. I mean, at one point, I guess media would be considered AI in today's. There was no the effect of AI that the media that we have on us today. You know what I'm saying? Like the effect of
You
media,
mean?
that the way media affects the mindsets of people, how it generates, what's
Yes.
good, what's bad, what's
Propaganda, right?
propaganda. So now
Yes.
it's going to be AI at much a faster rate than
Yes.
what media has already done for the last 50, 60, 100 years.
Yes. To quote, to use Chomsky's terms, manufacturing consent is absolutely, it's part of the game of democracy, isn't it?
But
It's
Sheikh,
part of the game of not just democracy.
fine, I understand
Any
that, but
kind
where
of
are the Muslims in this? Look at
Yes.
the way the Muslims have been manipulated. Look at where the Muslim lands are. So are we,
yeah.
from that sense, when you look at the Muslim lands, what are you seeing?
Well, when we emulate, this is the thing, right? When we are trying to emulate democracy, and I don't think we're doing that successfully, but you can see, right, in our
Even that.
societies. Yes, even there. And all the manipulation, take in the Middle East, for example, Saudi, UAE, they have a very healthy, they're pouring money into AI capabilities. They've got a very good handle on social media and Snoop technologies, right, which they purchase from their allies, right, the usurpers of Palestine. And they've got a very healthy understanding of the potential of AI and the power of AI. Yeah, and they're trying allegedly to have some form of democracy. It has absolutely no meaning because the people are not getting the actual news. They do not understand what is really happening. They are not being informed at all. So when they select something, even then, authority is very limited, right? And nothing there is from Islam. They are Muslim lands. The people are Muslim, but the
Let me ask you
system
this.
is
So, Sheikh,
absolutely not.
if the Muslims want to change, would the only way be a coup d'etat now? Because masses.
Okay, this is a different question and a different. It's a very good question.
No, because the
But
reason
it
why
is
I'm
a
asking
different
you this is
question.
because masses are so manipulated constantly. They don't know what they're watching. They don't know truth from falsehood. They
Yeah.
can't differentiate. They don't understand Islam, and if they do understand Islam, they mix it with secularism, this, that, and the other. So then, Sheikh, I mean, the only thing would be a few people who understand what Islam is and who understand the game take over. Is that the only way?
No. So the way for us is the method of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Allah sent as a messenger. There is never been the case in Islam when Allah says do something and Allah does not tell us how to do something. And Allah commands us to live by Islam, to rule by Islam, to judge by Islam. Allah tells you how to do this, right? He tells you how to attain that society. And Rasulullah is the best example. And how he achieved this is to establish what we call the inkilab of fikriyah, right? Where he completely overturned the basis of society. Where they were jahiliyyah, they were ignorant, and they were praying to idols, and they were, they had class, they had, disgusting rules and principles. Rasulullah completely turned that over. They were racist people, they were tribalist people, and it became a new civilization established on new principles of Islam. So there was first the understanding of Islam that there is a different way. There is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator, that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and what he brought, he is a messenger, and this is the way of life for the makhluk, right? So this conviction, this establishment of society on this first is necessary. And then the change will follow. So when Allah says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ, it is qawm, it is not the individual, right? It is everything from the core.
There's no question about that. I'm just looking at the level of manipulation, the massive manipulation that is taking place. I mean,
So,
look at
sorry,
right
brother.
now in Jenin.
So-
you have the Jews
Yes.
are in Jenin. They're destroying Jenin in the name of terrorism. Where are the rulers? Where are the armies? Where are the Muslims in
Yes.
general? At least we cared at least about Palestine. You have over 130 or so people killed in the last 3 weeks. Hundreds and hundreds have been injured. The whole Jenin looks like Allah knows what. I've seen war zones, akhi, and I know what happens after an army marches through a city, especially a refugee camp. And the whole, there is nothing. You look at social media, you look at, it's like nothing, now the people are back in Jenin and people are just trying to go back to their homes while they're showing these things that are complete destruction. Meaning is the Muslims are so easily manipulated.
So,
The
brother,
rulers
I
are
want to say this
manipulating them.
thing.
The West is manipulating them.
Yes,
So, Sheikh,
yes.
where,
However,
how
there
are
is
you-
there
go
is a
ahead.
difference.
Go ahead.
There is a difference, right? Now, this, I from what I see, the reality is when people, democracies or the West or whoever, right now, the so-called these marionettes, right? Marionettes are puppets where the string is pulled from above, right? Our rulers are marionettes. Where these people are behaving in the way that this is all preservation for this life, and then ba'dan, Allah will give them their just rewards, right? However, there's a difference. When they come in and they apply AI in social media, it is creating a fake narrative. And a fake narrative, it is lying basically, right? It is a lie, it is a picture which is not based on any reality. Islam isn't a counter narrative. And this is why I dislike to use the word narrative when we push the concepts of Islam or the ideas of Islam. Islam is truth. And there's a problem with truth. And that is you cannot wipe out truth with a falsehood. You can try and cover it, you can hide it, but it is not like just another narrative, right? You take a narrative, and the only way liars can win is when they create an even bigger lie, or they distract you. As you said,
Allah, you just defined
Jenin has been
kufr.
destroyed.
You just defined the word kufr.
Exactly. Now, what is the fight back against machine, amplification, false multipliers? At the root of it, it is truth. Now, if every single Muslim who believes in Allah and the final day, His messenger and the final day, he carries and conveys, look, listen, there's a secret here. That's something that people do not want you to know, but Allah wants you to know. And that is, we are not allowed. There is a better way to this, right? There is a better way of life where truth matters, right? And people who are poor, people who are ill, people who are sick matter. And justice matters. And, by the creator of this whole universe, justice matters. And this is a different way of life. It is based on reality. It is based on rational thought. It is an intellectual creed. When you take this, even though it is one-to-one, you can torture the person, right? You can beat him to a pulp to the point that he will say whatever you want him to say. But in his heart, he knows the inqilab fikriyah has happened within him because it is truth. Now imagine if we use AI or the capabilities of social media and so on to take this message, and this takes a bit of organization, right? A bit of thinking. But if we propagate truth, truth is unassailable. It is the single special thing. It is not just another narrative. It is not just another slogan or catchphrase to get elected for 4 years or 5 years or whatever, right? It is eternal. Now the point here is an opportunity for us to, yes, there are systems out there which are subject to manipulation because they have no basis. It's floating, right? But we also have a system that is established upon reality, upon rational intellectual creed, right? And this is where I think an opportunity for us now to take the message to the world, to be the messenger of the messenger, right? Using technology to amplify, to force multiply, to carry the message to the wider world and to the people who are suffering today all over the world, Muslims, non-Muslims, right? Americans, Democrats, or liberals, or whoever who really wants truth and just a better way of life. This is an opportunity to take the message out to them.
Subhanallah. Let's end it there, Sheikh. Let's end it there because this is a very good way of
Okay, I think.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
Inshallah.
خير إن شاء الله. يعني
جزاكم الله
سبحان
خيرا
الله.
أخي.
خلاص inshallah, because I think this conversation has to continue on. There is now, there should be just, if there is a way that a whole conversation on just the usage of AI in war, I don't know if you're willing to do that. Just in war.
I have notes. I had definitely have done some research on this, but my suggestion is perhaps we cannot go into the more sensitive areas, right?
Okay.
So I do not know whether you want to do that or not. I leave that to you. Have a think about it, and depending on the questions, we could probably do it. We can debate, its application, whether it's ethical or not ethical, and so on. What's the Islamic point of view? That can be a discussion. But it is a very sensitive subject, obviously.
It's sensitive,
right?
Because the way it's being, the way it's deployed, or
Yes. According to Stuart Russell, professor in AI, right, he's one of the big names in AI. He gave these Wreath lectures in Britain, 2021. He mentioned that the American government had already used AI during Desert Storm. Desert Storm, 1991, right? 91 is like 30 years ago. 30 years ago, they're already deploying it.
Because I was going to ask you this regarding manipulation. I remember watching when Kuwait was, the occupation of Kuwait by the United States at the time. If you look at how, first of all, there was a press conference, and in the press conference, the only people you see, there was BBC, there was CNN, and I think those were the only two. There was no Al Jazeera at the time. There was nothing at all, no other outlet. And they were the only ones basically talking about what is happening in Iraq.
Yeah.
And what's happening with Kuwait. So, and you could, the usage, and no one knows what they deployed, Sheikh. No one knows what they used, how they used it. And
yes.
Because if you look at the technologies that they're using now, it must have been already used somewhere. That's why they have such a better understanding of things.
Yeah. That's definitely. So that, in fact, there's a special, for example, China, right? In her military plans, has got a special section on psyops, on propaganda, psyops, the use of AI to achieve its aims. And China, they state in their military literature that the propaganda is more effective, much more important to win hearts and minds than even physical military weapons.
Yeah.
And that is using AI. So that thing that you talked about, language, ability to spot dissent in social media, to automatically counter dissent on social media using AI, to automate all of that.
When you were doing this language, of course,
there's natural language processing.
Yes. So let's say, for instance, a Muslim, a scholar, it's so important for him to understand the Arabic language, right? In order for him to do ijtihad.
Yes.
I guess I'm just asking that, how, I'm not from the perspective of manipulation, but I guess how, if you have a genius who knows, who's done the work around language, and but I guess that would have to do with usul. There would be a whole discussion. This is very interesting, Sheikh. Very dangerous even. And how?
I think it's very exciting to me. even language, you know, the models that you have now, the large language models, why they seem to work. And I put the word seem to work. There's a higher statistical percentage of it returning responses which make sense, which makes sense, which sounds human-like, which is factual. Higher percentage. When these large language models were smaller language models, right, they were failing. Statistically, it was failing because it's just a mathematical model that's responding, okay? Potentially then, the other way is also true. So you can train a system, right? I mean, sincerely train. Sincere here, I mean, not you know, corrupting it. Yeah. So you can train a system to be more and more and more accurate in its understanding of Fusha Arabic, right? Taking all the poems, the examples, the classical text, right? And it is then able to, you can make it much more accurate. It's like discovering all the different ways of folding protein. And AI can do this like that, right? So the potential for mujtahideen is enormous. I think it's going to be brilliant. The text that we have now, the stuff that's been burnt by the Mongols and all that, which were lost, you know, during the attacks of the Kuffar in Jerusalem and all that, we don't have it anymore, right? But we have what is there. It now takes us, all we have to do is take this body of information and knowledge, train a system on it, and work with the mujtahideen. And they can be what we call an expert support system, or an expert DSS, decision support system. Sits next to me, for example, if I'm a mujtahideen, I need to know all the source texts on the issue of eugenics or cell division or whatever the case is. Genetics, right? And the system will run it and will give me all, you know, will return all these things, and I will have to check it. That's up to me to check. I am also a scholar, but this thing has done it for me in seconds. Whereas if I had to go through every single book, every single text, every single scholar, his opinion, divergent opinions, it will take me forever. Do you know what I mean? It can expedite ijtihad. And when you have good ijtihad, your nation can progress at speeds nobody can see. You do not need to debate in ethical committees for weeks. The money people versus the ethics people versus the legal people, the academic people, right? I don't have to waste any time. I take their input. I have a system. I can come up with a hukum, can use, cannot use, for what purpose, etc. All the unintended consequences, even I can try and flush out, right? I mean, there are ways to deal with this, but that's for the mujtahid.
All right, Shaykh. So inshallah, we will end it with this. We are keep saying that, but man, so much keeps coming out of this.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. We end because I must pray Maghrib.
Yes.
Shukran jazilan.
Allah accept it from you, Shaykh.
Barakallahu. Ameen. Minna wa minkum. Assalamu alaikum.
Brothers and sisters, subhanAllah, I'm sure you're hearing these conversations with so many other podcasts and things like this. The potential for Muslims, if we are able to use this technology. You heard the brother talking about, you know, the use of AI in producing ijtihad, and the role of mujtahideen, and the role of the ulama, the role of language, the role of, being able to bring all what we know from the Islamic history, to feed it, to be able to get the kind of, answers that we're looking for, subhanAllah. And the potential is amazing, both for the scholars and for those who are in this technology. And but what matters most is fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It constantly goes back to that, is that it's so important for those who are involved in this kind of work to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, we'll talk about more and more of these subjects. See you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل همام نحن فينا عمر لا لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل همام نحن فينا عمر صبح بدا نور ظهر نجم وشمس وقمر ألقى على الدنيا الدرر هذا عمر كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر كي تستفيد من العبر. هذا عمر، هذا عمر. لا، لن تدوم الجراح، بل سيأتي الصباح. نحن أهل الكفاح، نحن فينا عمر. لا لا، لن تدوم الجراح، بل سيأتي الصباح. نحن أهل الكفاح، نحن فينا